So welcome to CS Office Hours. Today's topic is what is today's topic? Whoops, what was the actual name of it?
It was something along the lines of if there are already fundamentals of
CS fundamentals.
Yeah.
So if there's
Why
CS
does it look
fundamentals, why does every CS program looks so different, right? Something
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we called it. So the co-host today is Katya Alfaro. And so Katya, why don't you introduce yourself real quick and then we'll jump right in.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I am in the customer success team for a company called Glean.com. It's an enterprise search company. But previously, and why I'm here today is because I have had experiences at 4 different companies, ranging from buyer intent, app development, cloud computing, and now more recently, enterprise search. And the CS experience has been different each time. And now looking back at a couple of things that I could have put into consideration, like product and founders and stuff and things like that, just have a little bit of insight I would like to share with you all and talk on how you can figure out what type of CS environment you might be stepping into.
Okay, all right. So before we share those slides in terms of those types of insights, let me first just talk about just like some basic fundamentals. Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right. So when you have a CS program, there's a few basic things you want to do when you're setting one up, right? You want to think about your customer base for one. So you want to think about like if you're an early stage startup and you only have like a small handful of customers, you may not know what your customer base looks like. You may not know who your ideal customer profile is, right? But it may take you some time to figure that out. But ultimately, when you think about your customer base segments, you're going to think about like, what is their behavior? What do they come to use your product for? Is there like different buckets of customers? Do they have different goals using your product? Sometimes that can be because they're in different industries. Sometimes that can be the size of the company. So that like when I was at a fintech company, if they had a small fintech company where everybody wore 15 different hats, they used the product differently. They had different workflows than when they were at a very large company. And the finance team then, you know, they were all wearing like half of a hat almost, like, right? Because they had like 7 people in one group, 3 people in another, whatever. Then you had to have more complex workflows and they used the product differently. They had to communicate through the product differently, right? So that could be something. Or it could just be what, if the, some of your customers are used to using technology and other customers are not used to using technology. So then how you sell to them, how you onboard them, what if they're going to adopt your product could be different if they're coming from technology before, right? And they have certain expectations versus if they've never used technology and you're trying to wean them off of Post-it notes, right? The way you work with them could be different. The goals they have using your product could be different. So lots of different ways you might bucket your customers. But based upon that, then you have different customer journeys, right? And so you think about then those customer journeys. What are the key things they need to do to be successful? What do they need to be set up for properly when it's a sales to CS handoff? What do they need to do during onboarding? What do they need to do to adopt your product? Now that can also be different. I was once working with a founder and he asked me about like best practices for onboarding. And so I'm thinking of something that takes like about 45 days. So I'm walking through like, you know, best practices for onboarding. It's like, whoa, 45 days. If my customers aren't, you know, onboarded in 20 minutes, I've got problems. So that's different, right? There's a difference in maybe what those touch points are, but they still need to be onboarded somehow, right? So you're going to have the sales to CS handoff, you're going to have onboarding, you're going to have adoption, you're going to think about what expansion there is or what your renewals, you know, should look like, what kinds of things you're going to do if they exit. And if they're exiting, you still want to be nice to them on the way out. You want to understand, first of all, why they left, but also if you're really nice to them on the way out, they might come back. You never know, could happen. You're not trying to talk them into coming back, but you are going to try and talk to them and make it really nice in the way that you offboard them in that process, so that then they will remember you well and want to come back, right? So those are some like basic tenets. But again, if you have a 20-minute onboarding versus a 2-month onboarding, it's going to look different. You might have different people populating the different roles. Some of them way more technical, some maybe not technical at all, depending upon the product and the customer base, right? Those are the kinds of considerations you have. And then you have those fundamentals that you're sort of working through. And that's why folks like, you know, me and my boss, Kristen, we can walk in the door and we can sort of do a little checkbox and say, what are they doing? How are they doing it? How well do they do it? Are the customers happy? Do they survey the customers? Do they know if the customers are happy, right? Things like that, some basic things you want to do. So that's just sort of some basic tenets that I just wanted to like, or elements that I wanted to share to give you some sort of grounding in it. Now, is that cool? Any questions about that before we hand it over to Katya? And Kristen, of course, anytime you want to say something, you please just come off mute and speak up. Kristen, you there? Hello?
I'm here. I'm trying to be a fly on the wall though.
I know, but the fly can speak in this.
I'm chatting a few people in the chat. So
I know. But is there anything else you would add to that in terms of the fundamentals?
No, I think you did a great job of describing that, and I'm excited to hear what everyone else has to say.
Me too. All right, cool. So those are the basics. Again, any questions? Please ask me questions. Going once. Going twice. Well, you can ask questions later too. It's fine. Okay. All right, Katya, let me hand it over to you now. What did you want to add in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jan, I think that was a really great overview. And I think working with somebody like the Success League is the best case scenario is if, you know, you have a third party come in and say, these are all of the best practice and fundamentals. Here's where you are today. Here's where you can improve. From my angle, I was thinking about it in such a way for folks who are either looking for their next opportunity for whatever situation that they're in and start evaluating a company and wondering what does the CSM org look like, because it does look different everywhere. How do you do that? And I think you brought up some good points that overlap with what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
One of them includes the product. Oops. There you go. So research the product. I've like Jan mentioned that different products have different motions. So if you're interviewing at a company, researching company, or you're currently at a company, try to figure out which bucket they fall into. These are just 3 categories, by the way. This is not all inclusive.
No.
But is this a platform as a service, meaning that you probably have 3 or 4 direct champions and they're building tools for end users. So they might be building applications for their internal ops team, and you actually don't have access to those internal ops users? Or is this more of a software as a service where they will be using your tools and you really do need to be a product expert because you'll be doing demos to actual end users? Or is this going to be a product-led growth motion where you typically lean more heavily on scale CS programs and communities?
Or sometimes then when you have a product-led growth, then like with Slack, we're all using Slack. I never spoke to anybody at Slack, right? Yeah. You're not talking to anybody at Slack. We're all just using Slack. That's one version of product-led growth. But they also have a lot of CSMs there who are working with enterprise companies.
Yes.
Right. And so if you're at a product-led growth, you might be either working on the scale motion or you might be working on the enterprise motion. But it's probably sort of extreme like that. You're either high touch or very, very low digital touch.
Right, exactly. So for two of the companies that I worked for, one was cloud computing and the other was an application development platform. Those were platforms as a service. I didn't speak to a lot of end users. I spoke to maybe 20 contacts at that company because it was a very niche space, and it required me to be a lot more technical than it does at a intent buyer signal software, because that was more, product and feature expertise versus technical expertise. And then the other area that you touched on as well is the company itself, right? What stage are they in? But something that you could do to dig in just a tiny bit deeper is do a little bit of reconnaissance on the CEO and their background. Is this their first company, their second company? Or do they have a background, generally speaking, in engineering, sales, or product? Because if they come from product, then hopefully they have worked with the CS team before and understand what that function is. If they come from engineering and have never spoken to CS before, or have only spoken to CS in a capacity where they were technical account managers, they're going to have a preconceived notion of the type of service and motion that CSMs will be at their company that they're building out.
Or they might have worked at a company where CS really was kind of more support oriented instead of strategic. So they might be thinking customer success is just support.
Yes, it's important to look at who the CS leaders are, but ultimately everything will roll up to the CEO, especially if it's a smaller company. If it's a 250 size company and you have a head of customer success, things still need to get stamp of approval from the CEO. So as much as it's important to look for leadership that you would like to work for at a head of, director, or VP of CS level functionality, also look at the founder of the company and try to get a sense of what do they, what is their perception of what customer success is or should look like.
Great. You have one more slide?
No, you covered it.
Okay.
You covered the fundamentals. You did it. I cut it out just to allow more time for people to ask questions.
Okay, cool. So let's take down the slide for a second and see what questions there are just from what we've brought up so far. Because then we're going to go into breakout rooms pretty soon, but I know there's a lot of potential questions and also insights right here. Like Shauna, I know that you've worked in a number of different companies already, right?
Oh yeah, just a few.
So what thoughts do you have? What is this bringing up? Any war stories, any pain or glory?
To be honest, I think the answer, it depends. It kind of comes to mind, sadly or fortunately, I suppose, because even in my most recent role, a portion of the company was starting to move in more of a customer-led growth or product-led growth direction. But even within the segment that I was focused on, which were essentially 7- and 8-figure accounts, there's far more users and stakeholders than you can keep in touch with, even as a team of a reverse ratio, right? Like we essentially had 3 or 4 folks assigned to each one of these accounts, and there'd be no less than 15 folks from my organization, sort of a matrix organization on every call. And what I was starting to develop, at least before some recent restructuring that occurred there, were ways that we could get involved with some of the technologies that our other divisions were investing in, and try to bring some of those communications into this larger group, so we'd have more touch points, so we could have more signals to try to latch on to see where there were users who had questions about their product, or opportunities to increase efficiency, opportunities to provide more communication around the supply chain, which is a big part of this company, which hasn't really been part of my last few companies, which were mostly a pure software as a service. So I think there are going to be and will be more opportunities to bring scaled approaches into larger segments. I'm probably biased in that I sort of prefer organizations that start off this way, but I think that a lot of companies are going to be looking for folks, particularly CSMs, who have experience with approaching customers with technology and a little bit more of a blend than pure, hey, we're only going to talk to you through software, or only going to give you our email addresses or meet you in person.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and you make a good point too about like the enterprise level. Like there are times when even as an enterprise CSM, when you have like a large account, you still can't reach everybody. So there's a lot of tools and scaled methodologies, in terms of like being able to use like we're going to have a session at the end of the month about ChatGPT-3, right? And so like there are ways in which you can use tools to help you work through things more quickly so that the human touch part can be what you bring to it, and have the tools help you work smarter and be able to allow you to focus on the things that humans bring to it.
Absolutely. I think that's what it's all about. And even I believe a couple of weeks ago, I saw a post or an announcement from Catalyst, how we're experimenting with integration there to help us, produce emails where, we might be extremely busy in between meetings, just don't have the time to really develop something from scratch for a unique situation, and having the opportunity to leverage technology to overcome writer's block, or just help us get started with something that's maybe 50 or 60% of the way there, is really going to be a massive point of leverage for, I think, a lot of organizations, if they figure out the right way to implement that. Right, it's not going to be writing anyone's emails.
Churn Zero.
Yeah.
Churn Zero's already got that API set up too.
There you go. I knew it was one of the C companies. I couldn't remember which one it was. That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry.
No. Catalyst might be
earlier.
working on it too. They should be. They all should be, right?
Maybe I let I don't
No,
have
yeah.
there, but,
I wouldn't be surprised if they were.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to a lot of those opportunities, and even hearing from a couple very, very early stage sort of pre-seed folks that are building their platform with that in mind from the ground up, where it'll be a lot less rule based and much more focused on AI helping you do the job more effectively.
Yep. Cool. All right. Any other thoughts before we go to sort of breakout rooms? What kinds of considerations, what has been your confusion when you've been looking around at various CS programs, or anybody have a story they got into a CS program and then was like, whoa, is that how it's set up?
Maybe we'll get more of those in the breakout rooms, because
we got one more to share, and then we'll go to the breakout. How about? Sorry, I just see it says iPhone. Sorry.
Oh, hey, no, sorry. But yeah, I'm on my iPhone, which is why everything's different than usual. But I don't know if this is applicable or not, but I'm in a customer success program, or like a scholarship rather, that's through a nonprofit called the Mom Project. So I think that there's a lot of like boot camps, or like nonprofits, or like a lot of different ways that people can get involved in customer success. And it wasn't until about a month into the program that I realized this isn't customer success. They've been teaching me customer service. So I don't know if that's still applicable or not, but I think that there's a lot of confusion, not only at the company level, but also at like, the educational level, which is super frustrating, especially since it's a partnership with IBM Skillshare, and IBM Skillshare is the one that designed the curriculum. So there's that. I don't know. I just figured I'd share my experiences personally with it.
Yeah. And customer service, or, customer support is really important, but it tends to be more in the reaction mode of like somebody has a problem and you're going to troubleshoot it and help them. Whereas customer success is more of a strategic role, where you're going to help the customer reach the outcomes and goals that they have, right? And then you have onboarding. And onboarding is helping them initially onboard onto the product, and then sometimes also helps with some of the training. Christine Kukic here can tell you a lot about customer marketing and how customer marketing can play into some of these CS programs. We also have, sometimes we have people who are doing CS ops. I'm trying to think where my CS ops folks are. Oh, Felicia, great. You're doing CS ops, there you go. So CS ops then is usually working through and setting up the tools, looking at the strategy, helping the CSMs learn like what the processes are going to be. Whenever you're changing processes, you're really working with change management a lot. Then you got customer education, right? Customer education then is really focused on helping the customers learn things proactively, or at right time, learning things at the right time. So there's a lot of different kinds of roles within a CS program potentially as well. Kathy, you've got a question, and then we're going to go to breakouts. You're on mute.
I still get confused. Implementation goes in different places depending on the company's process, and I just, and they call different things implementation, and that confuses me all
Oh,
the time.
sure. So onboarding is usually just the concept of how you somehow get introduced and you start to use the product. Whereas implementation, and that can apply to lots, to a bigger umbrella, let's call it. Whereas implementation is usually referring to sort of a more technical implementation, where maybe you're setting up APIs because there's a lot of back-end data that needs to feed in or something like that. There can be a lot of different steps involved. Usually if there's an implementation, that means it's not going to take 20 minutes. It might take closer to the 2-month side or 30 days or something like that. But you might be working with, IT for a brief, period of time, or some other folks who are administrators of other systems in order to get things set up. So implementation is really more technical, and onboarding is not necessarily technical.
So implementation, I'm sorry.
Implementation, what?
The company I used to work for, I'm used to it coming first, because the way we worked,
right,
we had to have this stuff in
because
place.
you have to get set up.
But there's some places that do it after onboarding, right? I think it's after onboarding.
Yeah.
Well,
So you can see, you could have a flow that does onboarding, implementation, and then CS handoff. But in many cases, there's kind of an overlap between onboarding and implementation. Depending on the complexity of the product, it could be a big overlap where they're running almost simultaneously. And in others, it could just be a tiny bit of overlap because the implementation and onboarding, some implementation functionality needs to happen before you can finish onboarding.
Yeah, or some companies some companies don't have a pilot at all, right? And they just sign a contract and then it gets handed over to CS. So I mean, we're gonna go back to this phrase, as Sean mentioned many times. It depends.
Yeah. It depends on the product and the customer base and all of those things. Yep.
Sure. But Kathy, I do think
Industry.
one clarifying question during that, that conversation would be, when you are describing implementation, this is you asking the other person, when you describe implementation, are you speaking from a technical perspective or a project management perspective? Because you can project manage an implementation, or you could be the technical component of that implementation, and they're two very different skill sets.
That makes sense. Yep. Thanks, you guys.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and set up breakout rooms. We'll do it for 15 minutes, 20. We're gonna have 4 people in a room. Why don't we do 15 minutes, 4 people to a room? Quick introductions, but then jump right in. And if it might go a couple minutes over, but at least 15 minutes to a room. All right, sound good? Yes. Okay. Let me know if you have any trouble finding your room. Goes by pretty fast. I even gave you actually it's 18 minutes. So
Woo!
Wow.
Yeah.
That went
Thank
fast,
you.
Jan.
That was
better
fast.
than DGR for breakout.
Maybe
Gary, were you listening to us?
Oh, yeah.
You kept quiet. You weren't saying anything.
I'm cooking dinner.
Nice.
All right. So let's see. Am I pinning Katya there? All right. So what kind of takeaways did we get? Any good examples? And we're gonna write some notes. Shuriken and Ashna, let's write some notes as we go over in our thread for the session here. Let's see. I'm just gonna call on Jill. Here you are on my right here. What kinds of insights did you get?
Recording in progress.
Oh.
Well, hello. I love that I'm the person here and I'm like just getting started into all of this.
Well, good. So then
So-
what was your biggest takeaway? What
Well, my
unexpected-
biggest takeaway is I did happen to just have my second interview with an ed tech company today. I'm a teacher transitioning into a role. So really hoping that that works. And I was just talking about, I've probably applied, started applying at the start of the year. So maybe about to 35 like quality companies, and the 2 interviews, I have another interview for it's not a CSM role this week, but they all have been because of people that I've networked that I've either known before, or the one interview I had today simply came from when I was interested in this company. I reached out to someone that's in my area. We have a school connection, and she was willing to meet with me in person, and it came through her internal referral link. So
Great.
just talking
was
about
there anything in
importance.
the breakout session that you learned about, like with CS, or what kinds of questions to ask or something? Or?
A lot of the time we spent getting to know each other and kind of chatting about that and what other people's roles were. So all 3 other people in my group are currently working in a CS capacity, so that I'm excited because we'll connect beyond this, so I can ask them some questions that come up. So
all right.
Yeah, actually that's a good point. In our session, we pivoted to what CS platform to use in customer health scores, and 2 of our participants are going to connect offline to discuss how they built out their customer health scores. So we have a topic today, right? But hopefully the takeaway is that you network with folks who you can leverage in the future, especially as folks, start to evaluate other companies or consider how they can improve where they are today. And I think ultimately that's why I love these sessions, and super grateful that Jan and Success League puts this together.
Oh.
Around health scores and success scores, Lauren Costella, who is the head of customer success for Dental Intelligence. Currently, she's their chief customer officer. We just interviewed her for our podcast, and she's going to be talking about digital customer success on that podcast. But if you go back and you look at past episodes of our podcast, she did a really good one on how to build a health score. And she has done so much work on health score building that it would be a great resource for you. So Jan, is there a way for me to give that to you to like spread to the group if I can find that episode?
Oh yeah. In fact, we'll just go ahead and put the link to it in the Slack channel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get that to you later today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we were talking about health scores, and what other sorts of insights did we get?
I'll go. Our group was interesting because Jenna in it is from Australia, and she was building out a team and building out a new sort of customer success platform and comparing and contrasting different platforms that she was shopping for. So it was just kind of interesting learning about how one goes about like shopping those decisions and kind of the small details that might cause one to like edge out and win over another. And then the one takeaway was that culture is probably the most important for figuring out how a company views their customer success, and whether it's siloed off from other departments or if there's more like cross-pollination and integration with others.
Interesting. Jenna, are you there? Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, give me one sec. Hi guys. Yeah, so we're going through a process at the moment, and we were using Churn Zero many years ago when there wasn't really many options available, but now there are options aplenty. So it really is, you get to pick that niche to suit the business. But one thing that I found really important when going through and trying to find a platform that works for the business is really need to take your time and understand all of it, understand the product as you were talking about before, understand the other parts of the business, product, marketing, and how you can make that system work for you. Otherwise, you just implement a program, you go down rabbit holes, and you don't actually know you can't measure success because you don't actually know what success looks like. So take your time. It took me about 6 months in this role to realize how we could best utilize a CS platform, and now we're there. So now everything makes sense. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. How did you go through and gather your requirements for what you needed?
Yeah, so we used it a little bit from the previous product selection in our that we did a couple of years ago, but it was just I worked very closely with one of our developers as well. So it was really important that we both were on the same page on the implementation and the ongoing side of things to make sure it was easy for everybody across the business. So there were a few key things that we identified together that would benefit, but also seeking advice from product and from marketing to see how we can best utilize that. So it's just breaking it all down. We didn't overcomplicate it though, because as I mentioned before, a lot of these systems do the same sort of thing. So we just kept it really simple, which made it a lot easier going through these speaking to all of these providers, because we knew exactly what we wanted on that high level.
Got it. There's also some CS platforms now that are incorporating AI and ML, machine learning, directly in them. So you don't need to even integrate another tool. Things like Smart Carrot and Lantern out there are using those that to help you understand your customer base, to understand suggestions for your customer journey, to understand key moments that lead towards success in that customer journey for your different customer segments, things like that. So, and even as we were talking before, ways to suggest better conversations, that you can have, because they'll bring in all the sentiment with your customers, or looking at all of the emails and phone calls and tools and things like that, where then you can
There she is.
oh,
You froze for a second.
We lost you for a minute.
That's what
The
happened.
image was beautiful.
My internet, I had the guy here to help me get it fixed, and it's still not fixed. All right. I don't know where I broke off, but anyway, there's a lot of ways in which AI and ML can actually help, and there's companies out there that can help with that too. Katya, can we you had a great note over in the chat about questions to ask. Do you want to maybe talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of questions that you can ask, including, what does engineering think CSMs do, or what does product think CSMs do? It gets a little bit more specific than, hey, how's your company culture? Because everybody's going to give you the good bits instead of the things that they're working on. But I'll also add that you should also be asking yourself a couple of things. There was a question in the chat before about how do you even know which companies to evaluate? And I think you just have to ask yourself, what activities do you actually enjoy as a CSM? Do you like fast-paced things, or do you like more business strategic conversations? Because that would align more with a platform as a service versus a product-led growth or even a mid-market customer. So start with, what do you actually enjoy in your day-to-day, and what do you not enjoy in your day-to-day, and try to ask those questions in the interview process and evaluate those companies based off of their maturity. So don't expect a company that is 100 employees to have a mature CS ecosystem as a customer with 2,000 plus, right? And also think about your career trajectory goals. Do you want to wear multiple hats because you don't know if you want to specialize in onboarding, enablement, or implementation? Or do you have a niche that you really enjoy, like working with FedRAMP customers or working specifically in enablement, and that's where you should be focusing your attention? So start inwards first, figure out, what do I actually like to do on a day-to-day basis? What do I like about CS out of all the versions of CS that I've lived or have read about? And then as you're evaluating companies, ask some questions about, okay, what do your CSMs do today? What does the rest of the company think that CSMs do? What does the CEO think that CSMs do? And then just go from there.
And I just added over into the chat, and I'll put it in the Slack channel too, is that there's a free strengths assessment called high5test.com. And you can find out what your top 5 whatever.
I just took that like in the last few weeks and I thought it was very valuable and spot on, by the way.
Yeah, I like it a lot. You don't have to, I mean, what is the other one that we did, Kristen, but you have to pay for it?
Strengths Finder.
Yeah.
But if you've bought the
Develop
Strengths
system.
Finder book or how to now discover your strengths, or like there's any one of like probably 5 books you could buy that include it. So yeah. Bye, Christine.
That usually costs some money for that. So, but yeah, so there's lots of ways to then associate that and then also think about what kinds of roles you might want to do. Are there any leaders here that want to sort of weigh in on like when you've been first in and had to build a program, or when you've switched industries and had to, adjust or switched companies, maybe not even industries, and had to adjust in terms of the situation you're in, like how you're working in a CS program, how you're building it. I mean, I know I've been through that before, but I want to give someone else a chance to.
Yeah, it's Fran. I'm happy to jump in here.
Yeah.
I think it's really important when you are changing companies to understand, probably if you are reporting to the CEO or the CCO or vice president, and you're going to stand up the first program, to what is the intended outcome? What does success look like to them? Because they are ultimately going to be guiding the organization into that direction. And I think if we come with our preconceived notions from former companies and former leaders, that's when we have the opportunity to fail. So I just think understanding what the intended outcome is it, and when I say that, it could be, we want them to grow the business. We want a faster, time to first value, or we want to, especially if you're in a startup stage, we want to have multi-year contracts. And so I think before you can set up the customer success team, you have to understand what success looks like to them. And then you use your skill set to come with your recommendations and then align on that before you start building it.
That's some really great insights there, some really nice thoughts, because sometimes what goals they have with their customer base or what they're trying to do in terms of just whether it's even extending contracts, right? That's a big project for a CS team to do, to work with all of their customers to change out the contracts. So you definitely want to know if like the CEO or CFO has that in mind, right? What other thoughts? I know I've got some seasoned people in here. I want to hear what you got here.
I don't know about being seasoned. Oh, I'm sorry, Sean. I was just gonna mention that.
No, go right ahead. I'll jump in after.
Okay. I was just gonna mention that I love that Fran said, how do you measure success? I think that you ask that when you are looking at the opportunity. Also, if you're new to CS or you're new to it, you want to know, how are they going to measure your success? Because everyone's talking about data and metrics, but can your actions, your productivity, what you're doing affect the metrics that they're looking for? And if it's out of alignment, then it could be something where I'm never going to reach this, or it could be overwhelming. So you really want that to be spelled out, and it may shift and change as you take on additional responsibilities, or, you're looking at different platforms. For me, it's like with operations, being in the segmentation may change or shift throughout. So how are you measuring success is really like a really important question to ask, and I think for everyone, and to keep asking so that you always know and that you're proactive instead of being reactive.
Yeah, getting to that proactive place is really important. Yep. Sean, what were you going to say? Can't believe it's already just after 5:30. I guess we're closing up pretty soon, but so it'll be Sean and then Bowden. Okay.
Yeah, Thanks, Janet. Yeah, the conversation here, I think it's largely focused on this topic that we continue to dig into further, which is an interesting one, which is measuring success and evaluating performance. And I think it's particularly telling whether you're inside an organization or evaluating joining one, trying to understand, very specifically, like put it on a piece of paper for me and demonstrate how you evaluate the performance of your team. What are those success metrics? And then talk to other folks in the organization, depending on the level that you're at. If you can get to other department leaders, even in the executive team, ask them those same questions. Don't come with any preconceived notions or even any other information that you've heard from others, and see if what you're hearing from them lines up with that. And just to reflect very briefly, I've joined multiple companies where I've either done that beforehand or done that as part of my own personal onboarding in first weeks and months. And it's sometimes been a struggle to establish that alignment where, if you report to a C-level, they have some particularly important goals that they want the organization to achieve. And oftentimes it requires a lot of back and forth and negotiation to come up with, goals that you could actually achieve as a team that will support the company-wide goals. And I'm not necessarily talking about, revenue in particular. I think those are always very important, but others that are more operational goals, maybe executing on improving, customer satisfaction through, better training and onboarding, and just adding more rigor to your processes, or ensuring all of your CSMs are doing the same things, not just some of the standout CSMs on the team. So I think that's something that's been particularly interesting for me, and something that I will try to continue to challenge myself to do, getting to know new organizations and trying to help others figure out the best way to get everyone in alignment around like what are we actually doing as a success team, and how are we evaluating our accomplishments, so that we can decide what we can resource in the coming weeks and quarters, and invest in things that are working and stop doing things that are not working, instead of just paying lip service to them. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, that sometimes I've also been in situations where the goals that they have for the CS team, like great ideas, but it's not there yet. Like, we have to build up the CS team and, build up the program first. We can't even attempt to get to that. And so you do enter into sort of negotiation, or come to an understanding of, where like, this is the assessment of like, this is where we're at, and then how we can get there. So sometimes everything that's being asked of you, you need to kind of be able to sometimes take it back to them and say, this is what's doable. How much, where do you want to choose? Where do you want us to focus? Because, you've, in engineering terms, I don't know if anybody here has been a Scrum Master, but yeah, okay, good. So you'll know what I'm talking about. Like, they have like this storyboard, they'll assign points to the difficulty and how much time something can take for engineering time during what is called a Scrum, which is usually like a 2-week period. And like, if you have 20 points and they want you to do 30, it's like, I don't have 30 for you. I can't give you 30 units of output. I can give you 20. 20 can be done. And so like, that's it. You have to choose, right? And as CS leaders, we want to be able to do that too, and say, hey, we can do this much right now. Anyway, it's another thing you can also use, like in change management, how much you can change at one given time and be successful, things like that. Anyway, but what were you? There was somebody else that had their hand up. Sorry. Maybe they had to leave. Sorry. But let's go to you.
I just put the question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
I was
Bowden was up next, so I just want to be sure we go to Bowden next.
Okay.
The conversation that we were just having was reminding me of the danger of being overly fixated on goals and trailing metrics as well. And I think in the same way that a good definition of customer success is not when they hit a certain metric, it's when the customer themselves is already thinking about what's next after, while you're still approaching that goal. If they're thinking beyond that goal, it's a pretty good indication that you're part of a successful customer journey. Because I mean, I don't know if anyone else has had this. I've had customers churn directly after they've achieved their goal, because they're like, we achieved our goal. We don't need this thing anymore. So,
you always have to kind of set them up for the next thing. Yeah.
So to me, customer success is when the customer is actually thinking beyond the initial goal, that they're on a journey. And I think it's the same for a team as well. When you're looking at how to structure a team and define, you know, the incentives and the purpose of the team. Again, the advice I would give people is focus less on trailing metrics. I mean, obviously you got to report to the executive that all of those trailing metrics like NRR and NPS are all good and going in the right direction. And also educating them that, you know, yeah, 180% NRR is not a realistic CS metric in most cases.
Right.
But yeah, if there was one bit of advice,
and whether people know what NRR is or not, is when you have a goal or a metric that they're trying to get you to hit, that's like, what planet are you on? You know that you need to sort of work something out, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of yeah. Go ahead.
And you've got to just tie it back to making sure that everybody's on a journey rather than getting blinkered focus on metrics that, okay, even if you do hit the metrics, is everybody already working on what's next? Because I mean, if you think about one of these things, by the time an iPhone hits the market, the development of the next iPhone is already almost complete. You know, it's an annual cycle. You're already almost produced the next annual cycle by the time you release one of these. That's the mindset that good CS teams have got to be in.
Right. That's great. Great advice. Kathy, what was your question? And then we'll have to close it up for today, because I can't believe it, but we're 10 minutes over already. It went so quickly.
I was asking, if you go into an interview and you're trying to find out whether the CS team is aligned with upper management or not, whether they're fighting a struggle to find their way, how do you, and say you don't want to be any part of something like that, you want something that's in place and supported, how do you find out what the situation is, or can you in an interview?
One good question that I'd like to ask and recommend often is when you're, well, first of all, you want to be able to be sure that the process includes talking to people who are actually on the team. And even when you're talking to leaders, ask them, what would you like to see changed? What do you think, you know, the team does well, or the company does well, or, you know, also like the product, you know, that like the product is already achieved versus what would you like to see improved? Like, what would you like to see improved in the team? What would you like to see improved in the company? Where do you think like the product needs to improve? If you ask those questions, you're going to get some kind of response. Even if they're trying to sugarcoat it, they're going to give you some kind of, you know, and say it in a nice way. They're still going to give you some sort of insight into something that needs to improve. And it's always good to ask, you know, what's going well? You know, what have you achieved lately that's working well, and what could improve?
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm so sorry that time goes by so fast, because I was really enjoying the conversation, but I hope that you were able to get some takeaways today. Please be sure to connect with folks, you know, on LinkedIn, and also like over in our community. There's lots of questions here that are asked here and in chat. Ask them over in the community as well, because we've got like about right now maybe 245 people who are part of the broader community here, but not everybody gets to show up, even though we have like crazy numbers of people showing up each day now. So, you know, share in the broader community, share when you come on Tuesdays too, but you know, you all have something to help each other. Even if you're early in this process of switching over to CS, or if you've been in it a long time, there's always something to learn from someone else, and always something that you can contribute. So, and questions are as much of a contribution as insights. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming today. It was awesome to see you all.
Great session.
Thank you.
Next week, Kristen's going to be co-leading. We're going to be talking about CS as revenue leaders, and what it's like when you're selling as part of a CS role, and some best practices and that sort of thing. So it's a fun topic. And we're going to do it earlier next week because it's Valentine's Day. That's unfortunate for folks in Australia, but it's good for people on the East Coast and over in Europe. So anyway, we're hopefully capture everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
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 Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.